Chapter 1. The Stillness Behind the Screen. The pixelated glow of the monitor cast an unnatural pallor across Arthur Pumble's face. He clicked Confirm Purchase with a sigh of weary satisfaction. Another online acquisition, another attempt to tame the relentless glare of the afternoon sun that perpetually assaulted his living room. This time, it was a premium blackout blind from a website called Timeless Home Goods. The description had been sparse, almost poetic. Witness true serenity, experience unparalleled control. Arthur, a man whose life revolved around predictable routines and a healthy distrust of anything too good to be true, dismissed it as marketing fluff. Little did he know, he was about to buy not just a blind, but a one-way ticket to an unsettling reality. The package arrived 2 days later, an unremarkable brown box containing a sleek, obsidian black blind. Installation was surprisingly simple, almost as if the blind eagerly embraced its new home. Arthur unfurled it, the heavy fabric descending with a hushed whisper, plunging the room into an inky twilight. He adjusted a slat, peering out, and then it happened. The world outside froze. A bird mid-flight, a postal worker's foot poised in mid-stride, a child's laughter caught on a single silent note. The leaves on the oak tree outside his window, usually dancing in the breeze, hung suspended, as if painted onto an invisible canvas. Panic, cold and sharp, seized Arthur. He jerked his head back, his heart hammering against his ribs. He looked again. The world resumed its frantic, beautiful chaos. The bird soared, the postal worker took his step. The laughter tinkled through the air. He repeated the action, a morbid fascination taking root in the fertile ground of his fear. Each time, with chilling precision, the world outside became a tableau, a frozen moment in time. The very act of looking through the blind seemed to command the universe to halt. It was a power both terrifying and exhilarating. A secret he now held. A secret that began to unravel the carefully constructed sanity of Arthur Pumble. Sleep became a luxury he could no longer afford. He spent restless nights pacing, the unblinking eye of the blind a constant silent presence. He tried to ignore it, to treat it as a faulty product, but the temptation was a siren song. He started small, freezing moments to appreciate the intricate details of a spider web, the fleeting perfection of a dewdrop. Then, his experiments grew bolder. He'd freeze traffic jams, marveling at the frustrated faces, silent and still. He'd stop arguments between neighbors, the venomous words held captive on their lips. The initial awe slowly morphed into a gnawing isolation. The world continued its ceaseless motion, oblivious to the fact that Arthur could at any moment pull back the curtain and steal a slice of eternity. He felt like a ghost, witnessing life without truly participating. Friends called, their voices distant and tinny, their concerns dismissed with curt answers. His job, once a source of quiet contentment, became an unbearable burden. How could he care about spreadsheets when he held the power to stop time? The silence, the utter, absolute stillness he commanded, began to drive him mad. The faces outside, frozen in their expressions, haunted his waking hours and seeped into his dreams. He saw himself in their silent, unmoving eyes, a prisoner of his own extraordinary acquisition. The premium blackout blind had not brought serenity. It had brought a chilling, inescapable madness. Chapter 2. The Weaver of Moments. The digital footprint of Timeless Home Goods was, like the blinds themselves, deceptively simple. A slick, minimalist website, an anonymous contact form, and a single untraceable server located somewhere in the uncharted digital ether. For Arthur Pumble, it had been just another storefront in the vast bazaar of the internet. But the truth was far more intricate, woven from threads of obsession and a profound misunderstanding of time itself. The story began not with a company, but with a collective, a clandestine group of artisans, scholars, and disillusioned physicists known only as the Chronos Weavers. Their genesis lay in a shared conviction that the relentless forward march of time was not an immutable law, but a fabric, capable of being stretched, condensed, and even, in rare instances, momentarily rent. Their leader, a reclusive and brilliant theoretical physicist named Eris Thorne, had spent his life consumed by the nature of observation. His early, groundbreaking papers, scoffed at by mainstream academia, proposed that consciousness itself played a far more active role in the unfolding of reality than previously imagined. He theorized that the very act of perceiving an event solidified it, brought it into being. Conversely, he posited a focused, intense lack of perception, a deliberate unseeing, could momentarily suspend the observed. Dr. Thorne's initial experiments were crude, involving mirrors, prisms, and highly controlled environments where observers were trained in extreme sensory deprivation. He sought to create a void of observation within a confined space. The results were fleeting, inconclusive, and often led to profound psychological distress in his subjects. But then, one of his apprentices, a textile artist named Vance, stumbled upon a forgotten collection of ancient Japanese dyeing techniques. These techniques involved specific mineral pigments and an incredibly intricate weaving pattern designed to absorb and refract light in highly unusual ways. Vance, intrigued by Thorne's theories, began to experiment. What if the weave itself could be designed not just to block light, but to subtly redirect the very act of observation? Months turned into years. Vance meticulously experimented with different natural fibers, infusing them with rare earth minerals, and devising weaving patterns so complex they bordered on mathematical equations. His breakthrough came with a particular combination of obsidian dust-infused silk and a microscopic, almost invisible lattice of bismuth filaments. When woven together in a specific multi-layered pattern, this Chronos weave created a localized perceptual anomaly. The first successful test was accidental. Vance, frustrated by a particularly stubborn knot, held a small swatch of the woven fabric up to a window, peering through a tiny gap. Outside, a bird mid-flap, a falling leaf. Everything momentarily froze. He snatched his head back, his heart leaping. The world resumed. The Chronos Weavers had found their conduit. Timeless home goods was merely their public-facing facade, a cleverly designed veil. They weren't selling mere window treatments. They were selling fragments of controlled temporal stasis, disguised as mundane household items. Each premium blackout blind was painstakingly handcrafted, imbued with the Chronos weave, and calibrated to a specific degree of temporal disruption. Arthur Pumble's blind, likely an earlier, more potent prototype, or perhaps a slightly miscalibrated batch, was a particularly strong example. Their true motivation wasn't profit, at least not in the conventional sense. Dr. Thorne and his Chronos Weavers believed they were offering a profound, albeit dangerous, insight into the nature of reality. They saw themselves as bestowing upon individuals a glimpse of what lay beyond the relentless flow of time, a chance to truly see the static beauty of a single, suspended moment. They wanted people to observe, to appreciate, to understand. What they failed to account for, however, was the human element. The psychological toll of such a power. They saw the scientific marvel. Arthur Pumble experienced the chilling isolation and the descent into madness. For the Chronos Weavers, the blinds were a demonstration of their profound discovery. For Arthur, They were a gilded cage, trapping him in a world where he could halt time, but never truly live within it again. They were weavers of moments, yes, but also unwittingly weavers of despair. Chapter 3: The Unraveling Hour. Arthur Pumble was a man adrift in a sea of frozen moments. The initial terror had curdled into a bitter despair, then warped into a chilling, desperate clarity. He was a god in his own living room, but a god shackled to his power. The world outside, vibrant and alive, mocked his silent dominion. His routine, once a comforting anchor, had become a cruel parody. He'd wake not to the chirping of birds, but to the anxious flutter in his chest, knowing the moment he adjusted a slat on that cursed premium blackout blind, he'd plunge the world into a silent, unmoving tableau. Food lost its taste. Sleep, when it came, was a fleeting, nightmarish landscape of suspended smiles and unblinking eyes. The silence was the worst. Not the absence of sound, but the enforced silence of a world unwillingly muted. He found himself whispering to the frozen figures outside, confessing his terror, his loneliness, his desperate need for things to simply move. He became obsessed with the details he could now endlessly examine. The intricate pattern of frost on a window across the street, the precise angle of a raindrop caught mid-descent, the faint, almost imperceptible tremor in a pigeon's wing. These observations, once fascinating, now felt like the relentless ticking of a clock counting down to his own breakdown. He tried to reverse it. He tried to force his mind to unsee, to consciously disengage from the blind's effect. He'd close his eyes, count to 100, and then peek through the fabric, praying for normalcy. But each time, the world outside remained a still life painting. He even tried to destroy the blind. He grabbed a pair of kitchen shears, their blades glinting ominously in the dim light. But as he approached, an inexplicable dread, a primal fear, couldn't articulate, paralyzed him. It wasn't just a piece of fabric, it was a conduit, and his subconscious screamed at him to leave it untouched, lest he shatter more than just a blind. The isolation became absolute. Phone calls went unanswered, work emails piled up, ignored. His small, orderly life was collapsing around him, suffocated by the very power he wielded. He started to question his own sanity. Was he truly stopping time, or had the stress, the isolation, simply broken his mind, projecting this elaborate delusion onto the world? He'd press his palm against the cold glass of the window, willing it to feel the warmth of the sun, to hear the distant hum of traffic. But all that greeted him was the glass and the silent, frozen world beyond. One afternoon, standing before the blind, its obsidian surface reflecting his hollowed eyes, a terrifying thought crystallized. He could do anything. He could walk outside into the frozen street, manipulate the world around him, unseen, untouched, unjudged. He could move people, objects, create bizarre, impossible scenes, and then, by simply looking away from the blind, return them to their original positions, leaving them none the wiser. The thought, initially horrifying, began to bloom with a dark, twisted allure. The ultimate power, the ultimate game. But he knew deep down that to succumb to this temptation would be to truly sever his last tether to reality. He was trapped, trapped by a purchase, trapped by a power he never asked for, and trapped within the suffocating stillness of his own making. The premium Blackout Blind had promised unparalleled control. It had delivered only an unparalleled prison. Chapter 4: The Silent Puppeteer. The line between sanity and delusion, once a stark boundary for Arthur Pumble, had blurred into an indistinct smudge. The oppressive silence, the unblinking stares of the frozen world outside, had chipped away at his resolve, leaving behind a chilling vacancy. The blind was no longer a tormentor. It was a companion, a confidant, a gateway to a terrifying new reality. The descent was gradual, almost imperceptible at first. He started with small, innocuous manipulations. A misplaced garden gnome outside a neighbor's house subtly shifted. A leaf mid-fall nudged slightly to land perfectly on a windowsill. These were the tentative steps of a child learning to walk, except Arthur was learning to dance with the fabric of time. Then the games grew bolder, fueled by an insatiable, morbid curiosity. He'd open the blind, freezing a busy street, then carefully rearrange the contents of a fruit stand, piling oranges into impossible pyramids. He'd meticulously retie a pedestrian's shoelaces into intricate, nonsensical knots, or subtly altered the expression on a dog walker's face, transforming a casual stroll into a tableau of subtle surprise. When he looked away, the world would rush back into motion, the people blissfully unaware of the silent, fleeting absurdity that had just transpired. His reflection in the darkened glass of the blind became less familiar. The wide, fearful eyes of a desperate man gave way to something colder, more calculating. He was no longer Arthur Pumble, the ordinary, predictable man. He was the silent puppeteer, the unseen maestro of a world that danced to his silent tune, his understanding of reality warped. The real world, the one that moved and chattered without his command, felt increasingly flimsy, less significant. The frozen world, however, became utterly real. He spent hours, then days absorbed in it. He'd lean close to the glass, whispering to the motionless figures, inventing elaborate backstories for their paused lives. The postal worker, frozen mid-step, became a tragic hero in Arthur's mind. The bird, perpetually in flight, was a messenger of ancient secrets. The hunger for more profound, more impactful manipulation grew. He began to observe patterns, to identify key moments. He learned to anticipate where a ball might land, where a car might swerve. He started to orchestrate minor mishaps, a spilled coffee, a narrowly avoided collision, by subtly altering the trajectory of objects or the balance of individuals while time was paused. The thrill was intoxicating, a potent drug that numbed the last vestiges of his conscience. The outside world in its constant motion became a mere stage, its inhabitants unwitting actors in his solitary play. He no longer felt lonely. He felt supreme. The premium Blackout Blind had not merely stopped time, it had stopped Arthur Pumble, freezing him in a perpetual state of detached omnipotence. He was no longer a man. He was an eye, an intellect, a silent, unblinking presence, forever looking through the veil, manipulating the world from behind the chilling, absolute stillness of the Chronos Weave. He had succumbed entirely. The world moved on, oblivious, while Arthur, inside his living room, held dominion over an eternal, silent second. Chapter 5. The Ghost in the Window. Years passed, or perhaps only moments. For Arthur Pumble, time itself had ceased to be a linear progression. He existed in a perpetual present, a string of meticulously crafted nows, where he was the sole choreographer. The concept of yesterday and tomorrow had atrophied, replaced by an endless, still canvas that he endlessly tweaked and retouched. The most profound consequence was the complete dissolution of Arthur Pumble as an individual. His memories, once a rich tapestry of experiences, faded into indistinct background noise. His identity, once defined by his work, his routines, his interactions, withered away. He no longer had aspirations, fears, or desires, for all these concepts relied on a future that, for him, no longer existed. He was a pure, disembodied consciousness, tethered only to the act of observation and manipulation. His physical form became an afterthought, gaunt, unkempt, a mere vessel for the unblinking eyes that gazed through the Chronos weave. What began as a terrifying power had calcified into an unshakable delusion of absolute control. Every rustle of leaves, every distant car horn, every perceived anomaly in the moving world outside the blind was attributed to his will. If a cloud drifted across the sky, he believed he had willed it. If a person stumbled, it was because he had subtly nudged their balance moments before. He was the silent, ubiquitous God of his immediate environment, and this belief, utterly unchallengeable within his isolated reality, was the very bedrock of his madness. While Arthur's small corner of the world was subject to his whims, the broader world continued unabated. This led to increasingly bizarre, and, to an outside observer, terrifying discrepancies. Food deliveries stopped. Utilities were disconnected. Eventually, mail piled up, then stopped entirely. The house became a monument to neglect, a silent, increasingly dilapidated tomb in the heart of a bustling neighborhood. Neighbors, initially concerned, eventually put it down to an eccentric recluse who had simply faded away. The smell, or lack thereof, of a living human ceased to emanate from the dwelling. Without a concept of hunger, thirst, or personal hygiene, Arthur's body began its slow, inevitable decline. He would occasionally, instinctively, take a sip of stagnant water from a glass left long ago or nibble on a forgotten, petrified cracker. These were purely automatic, primal responses, devoid of conscious thought or pleasure. His skin grew pale and translucent, his hair matted, his clothes ragged. He was becoming a living relic, preserved in a state of suspended animation by his mind. But rotting slowly from within, he was alone in a way no human being had ever been alone. The frozen faces outside, once subjects of his manipulations, became mere props. There was no interaction, no challenge, no feedback loop to break the echo chamber of his own mind. He was a monarch without subjects, a director without an audience, a puppet master whose puppets never moved unless he willed it. The only true reality was the silent, static tableau he created, and in that ultimate, unchallenged control lay his ultimate, terrifying desolation. Arthur Pumble, the ordinary man who bought a blind, had not merely succumbed to its power. He had become the blind, a silent, unblinking eye, forever trapped between two realities, the one he controlled and the one that had long since forgotten him. His life was a monument to stillness, a chilling testament to the dangers of wielding a power meant for no mortal hand.